Today we're looking at Robert Oster Blue-Black. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Robert Oster's Blue-Black is, again, a blue-black ink. To make sure I have a range of writing experience with this ink, I do my writing samples. I then put the ink into a different pen for a day. I then put it into a Lamy All-Star with a 1.1 stub to take my notes for this video. Before we get to the writing samples, let's take a look at some of those sciencey bits. Up first is a chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done, and it is interesting. It flees immediately up the page, but what we see is this purple going all the way up. We see this line of blue with very, very dark, almost blackish spots. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water, and it looks exactly the same. This means I expect no kind of water resilience from this ink whatsoever. Resistance tests are done to see how well this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how difficult it might be to clean out of your pen. I let the smear dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, we see that this does start to spread some. Not an incredible amount. It doesn't make it unusable. I would be willing to use this if I had to highlight while I was taking notes. This would be an okay ink. When we look at the water, we see a tremendous amount of this ink comes up off the page. It's very, very light blue where that spot of water was. Now, Pen Flush did very much the same thing. We see that as it even came down the smear, it got lighter and lighter. It's almost turning white in that one area. Although I don't think you would need Pen Flush to clean this out of your pen. And as would be expected, bleach obliterates it, totally removes it, but does rough up the paper a bit. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average viscosity of 2.5, with average or normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Robert Oster's Blue-Black has a viscosity of 1.96, which makes it a very flowing ink. Some might even call it wet. To find my average dry time, I use my writing samples for the extra fine and medium nib done on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Robert Oster Blue-Black has an average dry time of 16 seconds, which makes it completely normal, despite being such a wet ink. Now let's look at the writing sample. I got this ink in sample form, and to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub. I use a Jinhao X450 with a medium from Goulet, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's look at Clairefontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting, and with the 1.1, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Not a lot of shading with this 1.1 here. But there is spots of shading. It's just not as much. Little there. Little bits there. Not tons there. With the extra fine, we get no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Shade. Lots of shade. Really intermittent, which will show up in the scrubby. But we get a ton. We get it in quick. We get it in lazy and dog. We get it in over. 11 seconds to dry. With the medium, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. We're still getting shading. So we get it in the, we're getting it in over, we get it in lazy, we get it in brown, we get it in seconds. We have 17 seconds to dry here. This is a great shading ink. Now looking at the scrubby, the thing is, I would have thought I spilled something on this sample the way spots of light show up and spots darker show up. But that's not what happened. There was no spillage here. Back at this time that I did this, I thought I was going to do water tests, and to me that didn't matter. That if my notebook goes in a puddle, then it might just be lost, or I need to use a flat out permanent ink. That's what I wanted deciding, so I stopped all those. Now, that's a performance of the ink. It does that all on its own. That's pretty neat there. It just looks kind of nice. My smears, I could definitely recover the smears. And this is interesting, the Tomoe River.
The Tomoe River gives us no bleeding. It gives us no bleeding. It gives us ghosting because it's Tomoe River. Looking at the 1.1, this ink performed better on Tomoe River in a lot of its qualities than it did on Clairefontaine. The 1.1 has no bleeding, no feathering. It has haloing, minor haloing all the way around. Just the tiniest little black lines tracing out the letters. So we have halo on the 1.1. We have no sheen, but a ton of shading in the 1.1. This is just a beautiful ink and paper combination. The extra fine, no feather, no spread. We don't have the haloing here. We don't have sheen, but we have shade galore. Every word, all over it. Shading, 16 seconds to dry. Medium. Medium has no feather, no spread. It has haloing again. You have to really, look at it. It's just when you're reading it, it's like this quality that just sort of jumps out about it. Again, that tiny elves outlining your letters. And that's what happened. Robert Oster has tiny elves show up and outline the letters for you. Shading all over it. Now it's a much darker, so you don't see it's not as jump out on the shading. But it's there. When we look at the top of the T for the and the E are definitely different tones entirely. If I look at Fox on the left side of the F to the right side of the F, definitely different. I look at jumps, the beginning of the J to the swoop of the J, definitely different. So we're getting some shading. I'm trying to ignore the part where I put my thumb. The scrubby shows us some shade difference that's going to happen in the medium. I don't think it's showing up too well. It is kind of showing up on camera with the medium, not as much in the medium. The extra fine definitely shows us the shade, and the smear doesn't recover. Looking at Rhodia paper, we have no bleeding, no ghosting, no ghosting. It looks like it in the camera. I looked up at the camera and I got confused because I was looking at the paper, and I don't really have ghosting. Looking at the 1.1, we have no feather, no spread. We have halo, no sheen, no shade. But that halo is a neat effect. Going on to the extra fine definitely gives us a lighter shade here. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, definite shading in the writing, and 9 seconds to dry. This is it's like a quirky ink. It gives me halo sometimes, gives me shade sometimes. This is just kind of neat in what it's doing. Thank you, Robert Oster. This is a lovely blue-black. 9 seconds to dry for the extra fine. On the medium, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. We lose the color variation here. We lost it. So this particular nib and paper, I wouldn't do. This is a boring one. To me, I would avoid this. That's just how I look at it. I would avoid this. Now, I was using a Lamy All-Star with a 1.1 stub, because I always like to take my notes in something I didn't do the writing samples in, and something I didn't carry this ink in when I was playing with it. But the interesting thing is, the Lamy 1.1 gives us really nice color variation. And again, with that kind of toss-up of what you're going to get, the Great has some spots that have some halo, but then it stops having halo and has shade. I don't know. That's crazy. But that's what we're getting. This ink to me is just doing fantastic stuff. The smear, you could probably recover that smear. I'm looking at TWSBI paper. TWSBI paper winds up having... Ooh. Okay, so this spot is user error. This might be a little bit of bleed. but it's only there in the scrubby, so I wouldn't even really look at it as bleed, but there's no ghosting. With the 1.1, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. We do have shading. If you look at the blue, how dark the B is to the L and U, back to the really dark B. So we're definitely getting shading. With the 1.1, we have no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. It's definitely a lighter tone, and it has shading. So the extra fine on the TWSBI paper does very nice, 7 seconds to dry. Medium nib gives us no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, and subtle shading. Subtle shading. It goes from a dark blue to a dark blue in some of the writing. It's just not real standout, but we do see it in the word brown, where it starts really dark, and on the O, W, it gets a little lighter, and on the N, a little darker again. The Fox has a really dark left side and a lighter up swoop, and then it gets dark to the OX. So we do get some areas of some nice shading. The scrubby shows us that the medium's not going to give us as much. It goes from a dark to a dark. And the extra fine, that we should be able to go from a lighter blue to a very dark blue. The smear, we should be able to recover that. Then I checked Leuchtturm 1917 paper. No bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 gives us, there we go, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, nice shading. Pretty shading with this ink. All the way through, really. The extra fine gives us a much lighter tone. Much lighter tone. Very nice. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. Definite shading. Nice shading all the way. 8 seconds to dry. And the medium, a super dark compared to the extra fine. Super dark. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. We lost it though. So again, here it gets to be more boring. Blue-black, dry pen. It's going to make that shading jump out. 10 seconds to dry. Now when I look at the scrubbies, I see that the medium's not giving me a ton of color variation, and the extra fine is giving me a whole lot more. Now on the smear, you're not recovering that smear. So that's what I have for the writing sample.
Instead of finding inks that look like Robert Oster Blue-Black, I would prefer to find a color that would complement it on the page. And I've chosen Private Reserve's Burgundy Mist because it's a great red magenta color. Before I give my opinions on this ink, I would ask, if you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Robert Oster Blue-Black? Thank you, Bob. Thank you so much for making such an amazing blue-black ink. It is my favorite of all blue-black inks I have actually tried. It is amazing in what it does, and it's so consistent in every nib on every paper. Absolutely amazing for people who do like blue-blacks. Thanks for watching.